Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his teaching, the islands will put their hope. So, first of all, who is this servant? Because verses 1, he says, here is my servant. Now, the Jews who did not believe in Jesus always believe this servant referred to them. And the reason is, if you go back to chapter 41, and there are many other references to the book of Isaiah, when it clearly, the servant would refer back to Israel. Like, for example, chapter 41 verse 8, but you, Israel, my servant. So the Jews believe the servant actually refer back to them. But obviously, the Christians would not agree, because even this passage is quoted by Matthew in Matthew 12 as being fulfilled in Jesus. So to the Christians, this servant is no doubt Jesus the Messiah. Now it's the servant God is going to uphold, like he's going to assist him, because the servant is going to go through a lot of suffering, and God has to enable him to suffer. And he also the one chosen by God to do the redemption. And God is very pleased with him. And we remember when Jesus was baptized, and there's a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I delight. And I think the reason God delights in him, certainly because Jesus understood the heart of Father God, wanting to do the work of redemption. And he was willing to go along at great suffering to himself. And I think that's clearly the reason why God is so pleased with Jesus. And God will put his spirit on Jesus, like the spirit will enable him again to do the work. And he will bring justice to the nations. Now, the justice or the righteousness actually is the gospel. So Jesus will bring justice, righteousness, which is really God's way of justifying the sinners. And so he will do the redemption work and bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. And when Matthew quoted these verses here, it was the occasion that Jesus healed many. And then Jesus would tell all those that were healed to keep silent. And so that I think this is referred here, like he will not shout or cry out. Jesus doesn't need, or he doesn't want, the kind of publicity, like all of his healing miracles, and unlike people nowadays, if you accomplish something great, you probably want the whole world to know about it. But Jesus is of a different spirit. By the way, these four first verses that I just read you is called the servant song. It's the first servant song. And actually, the Bible scholar has identified, they have identified four servant songs in the book of Isaiah, and I think they've been called in the New Testament and being fulfilled in our Lord Jesus. In verse 3, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not slough out. I found a commentator who has beautiful words to just explain these two sentences. And so I just read you what he says. Like bruised reed and smoldering wick refer to spiritually, physically, or morally weak. A reed that is bruised may be damaged, but it is not irreparable. A smoldering wick may be about to lose its fire altogether, but it can still be reignited. We expect most people with special abilities to run to the nearest port line, like that is this is quoting back to verse 2, he will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. And commentator says here, we expect most people with special abilities to run to the nearest spotlight, hire a promoter, or in some other way strive for as much fame as possible. But Jesus was not like that. In fulfillment of prophecy, he did not shout. He worked quietly, at times purposely avoiding the public eye to accomplish God's will. And then there's the bruised reed. To the world, a bruised reed is a worthless thing. It has no power, no stability, no purpose. It's good for nothing but to be cut down and discarded. So in the world, there are many bruised people, individuals who have been wounded emotionally, spiritually, or physically. They are feeble, and to most of the world, they are dispensable, but not to God. The prophecy that Jesus fulfilled is that he, the bruised reed, he will not break. It's a prophecy that speaks of Christ's tender, compassionate care for the weak and downtrodden. So we have many examples of Jesus, like the woman taken in adultery was a bruised reed, and Jesus saved her from stoning and forgave her sin. Or like Peter, who was also a bruised reed after his denial of the law. But Jesus gently and lovingly renewed him to fellowship after the resurrection. Over and over in the Gospels, we see Jesus caring for the bruised reeds of the world. Jesus understands the bruised reed. He was bruised for our iniquities. In other words, he was bruised on behalf of those bruised by sin. Those who come to Christ, he will not despise. They have this promise from Jesus. God sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. You may be a bruised reed in some way today. You may be pressed down with the troubles of the world. You may be struggling with doubts and fear. You may be feeble and disheartened and ready to break. But know this, Jesus cares. He will have pity for the brokenhearted, compassion for the humble, affection for the penitent, and healing for the afflicted. Come to him in faith, humbly trusting his strength, and find that he is gracious to all. I think these are beautiful words explaining these two sentences. And I think my older brother is also like a smoldering wick. I have one older brother. Maybe he also went to church when he was in maybe early teens, very, very young teens. But because my own mother died when we were very young, and later on, my father remarried. And at that time, my older brother, he couldn't get along with the stepmother. So my father sent him over to Australia when he was only early teens. And later on, he would return back to Hong Kong. And when China, Deng Xiaoping opened up China for development, he was the first to go into China with a major developer in Hong Kong. So they started to build maybe the first hotel, Western hotel in Highland Island. And he has lived in Highland Island ever since. His wife is also a very devoted Christian. So all these years, I think that she would go to like a Christian church in Highland Island. My brother would drive her there and would just come pick her up. So for all these years, he would refuse to go back into church ever again. And a few years ago, he and his wife also came to visit me and Kathy. And so one Sunday, so we decided, well, we go to church, right? And so I guess that morning he didn't have any excuse enough to get him off the hook. So I guess he reluctantly went along while we were still worshiping in the Anglican Church in Richmond. But going into church for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, he just couldn't stand being in the church, and he had made some excuse and excused himself and just leave the church. I don't remember he got someone to pick him up or drive the car away. I don't remember, but I doesn't remember. He couldn't even be in church, even just politely to be with us. So I don't know why he has that kind of repulsion feeling, repulsive feeling of being in the church. Anyway, so I think it's over 60 years that we couldn't get him back even to church. But then, I mean, to the law, someone that rejects him so much, and probably is a smoldering wick, we think, that's lady, there's not much light in him. But not to Jesus. Jesus has his ways. So maybe 6 or 7 years ago, like he was in Hong Kong doing some kind of a heart examination. And the doctor, the cardiologist, is also a very good Christian doctor. He took an X-ray of him. And just looking at the X-ray picture, it seems to be okay. So right away, he head back to cross the border and catch a flight right away back to Highland Island. While he was on the bus, just on the other side of the border, he received a call from the doctor saying, "Oh, you have to come back immediately." And so I guess reluctantly, he just took another bus and went back to Hong Kong. And then the cardiologist said, "Well, your heart looks okay, but somehow the X-ray caught a little bit of your liver, and it seems that you should go and take an examination of your liver." And when he did that, he found out he has liver cancer, and so right away, he went for surgery, and so he was okay. And then recently, so because of that, every 6 months, he has to go back from Highland Island to Hong Kong just to follow-up examination to make sure there's no the cancer would not recur. So the last 2 years have been very difficult because every time he go back from Hong Kong to China, he had to be in isolation for 21 days. And it's not easy, but he was joking with me, he's a veteran now. So he knows what to do, what food to bring with him and to stay at the hotel, and what kind of entertainment he'll use, exercise he'll do. But lately, and he's still in Hong Kong now for the latest exam. Maybe a few weeks ago, that he went back to he went back to Hong Kong for his regular checkup. But this time things are very difficult because all of a sudden there's no way people could go back to Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to China, because you don't know how many people that were in Hong Kong that have family in China. And so all of a sudden, many people want to go back because 2 years was very difficult. And then the Chinese authority only limit about $1,000 people for you to cross the border. And then maybe there's 6 buses that will take you to from Hong Kong to Zhuhai, the closest city to Macau. You know how much you have to pay for those tickets now? The ticket will sell nominally for $68 or $70, but in the black market, they'll usually catch a price of $3,500. So 50 folks, what the nominal price is, and even that you cannot get any ticket. So anyway, and when he was examined at the hospital, and the doctor said, "Oh yeah, okay, but it seems like you need to take a look at your stomach." And so, he said, "Oh, that's good reason. I couldn't go back then. I can stay for my stomach exam because usually he'll try to go back right away, right? Because every trip for him would take usually a month. He's anxious to go back home." But anyway, I talked to him maybe a couple weeks ago, and he was just telling me, he just saying, "Well, there are just so many things happening in my life. And somehow someone is taking care of me, looking after me." And I said, "Well, isn't it God?" But he seems to be, he said, yes, right. He said, "It must be God." But it seems somehow he couldn't even utter the word God out of his mouth. But in any event, my younger brother told me, the last couple of weeks, he went to church on his own. So I think it's just God's mercy, it's Jesus' mercy on him. After someone who rejected him over 60-some years, that he could change, he could tenderly rekindle that fire, that he would go back to church. That's really, truly amazing. Okay, in faithfulness, he will bring forth justice. Frank talked a lot about faithfulness this morning. He brings forth justice. Justice is the righteousness for man. That is the gospel that we have. So he will faithfully bring forth the redemption work that's accomplished the gospel for us. Verse 4, he will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice, like the good news on earth. Now, there's certainly a lot of things Jesus could be discouraged, and yet he was so resolute in accomplishing the mission God has put on him. Luke 9:51, when the time come that he should be received up, there's a time he should be received, like going back to heaven again, then he would steadfastly set his face to Jerusalem, despite the many things he has to be suffered, and despite that he's going to be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, teachers of the law, and he must die. And yet his face set so steadfastly to Jerusalem, nothing would stop him from heading that direction. All we have to do is maybe compare him with Pilate. And we know when Pilate tried Jesus, and Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. But when the elders cry out, we have no king but Caesar, we have no king but Caesar. And then the mob outside would say, crucify him, crucify him. And soon Pilate would just succumb to the pressure and and condemn Jesus to die on the cross. And so we see the courage of Jesus compared with someone like Pilate. It's in his teaching, the islands will put their hope. If you remember the chapter before, the islands that they represent, like the idea is the islands were the farthest nations in the world of that day, or they conceivably seeing that. And so the islands represent the Gentile nations. And in his teaching, because Jesus brought this salvation, including salvation. So the Gentiles would put their hope. And so in the chapter before, the Gentiles were all trying, when we remember when the conqueror, when Cyrus was conquering the nations, what they were trying to do is they tried to build better idols, stronger idols that won't tumble. And so, but now, in a future day, when this Messiah comes, the Gentile would also put their hope in the Messiah instead of their idols. Verse 5, this is what God the Lord says, the creator of the heavens, who stretches them out, who spreads out the earth and with all that springs from it, who gives breath to his people and life to those who walk on it. So again, God declares he is the creator of heaven and stretch out the heavens like tent covering over us, and then spreads on the earth like all the things, the vegetation, everything on it. It's just like God spreads out like our lawn in our garden, and gives breath to his people. And life to those who walk on it. So no one can give life except the Creator. So he gives breath to people and life to us that walk on it. So the Creator of the whole universe again qualifying himself as the Creator of the earth, and he said, I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. So the Lord has called his servant, the Messiah, in righteousness, because God is righteousness. He cannot forgive sin without a sacrifice. So, and Jesus is the only one that is innocent, that is sinless, that could do that sacrificial work. So he called. So in his righteousness, in fulfilling God's own attribute, like being righteousness, so he called Jesus in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. So again, he will lead Jesus. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people. So, like Jesus entered a new covenant to be a covenant for the people, the mediator for the people, and a light for the Gentiles, so that to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. So Jesus, more than Cyrus, who is only a deliverer, of Jews from captivity in Babylon, Jesus is going to be another, a more mightier deliverer. He's going to deliver people, including all the Gentiles, from the captivity of sin, of darkness. And so the gospel is going to be sent over to the Gentiles already in the book of Isaiah, clearly stated here. 8. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another, or my praise to idols. So one day this gospel would be spread to all these Gentile nations, and they would abolish, like in China, like 200 some years ago when Robert Morrison went to China, and he was describing, oh, there's so many idols. The idols are everywhere in China. And yet now so many of them would get rid of the idols. And so many of them has given up their life to the Lord. Verse 9. See, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare before they spring into being. I announce them to you. Now, what are these former things? Well, they can be like some of the prophecies that Isaiah has given. For example, in chapter 7, you remember when Ahaz would not ask the Lord for a sign, and so Isaiah said, oh, the Lord is going to give you a sign. A virgin is going to give birth to a child named Emmanuel, and before the child knows right from wrong, there is maybe like within 12 years, the two kings you are so afraid of, like the king from the northern kingdom and also the king from Damascus or Syria, they will be laid to waste. That means the two countries would be no more. So those are former things, and they were fulfilled. And so, and now the idea is I'm going to declare something new beforehand. So just like declaring Cyrus to come long before he would arrive on the scene to prove that I am the law of the universe. I control the history. So it can be taken in that sense. Also, there's also another way you can read it, like former things. Another thing is about Babylon in captivity. That was already prophesied by Isaiah, I think in chapter 39. There's just a few chapters before. They are going to be captured in Babylon. So these things also have taken place. Or you can say sometimes in here it can be general things like former things can also mean like the Old Testament, the Old Covenant have taken place. The way I read it myself is, I think it says here that now the Old Covenant curse, when you were disobedient, you will be captured, you'll be in captivity to foreign lands. So I think, to me, I think there's an idea of that curse that now fulfilled. And because it's the revealing of a Messiah, a greater deliverer. So new things, I think God is, is declaring he's going to have a new covenant. And before they spring into being, God is announcing it beforehand. Now this is 700 years ago, before Christ come, and there are many many scholars would not believe that the second book of Isaiah, like from chapter 40 onwards, was written by Isaiah himself, because they just say, oh well, it's maybe another disciples of Isaiah. These are things too far away from Isaiah So they believe lightly these were written by his disciples. But here we actually have another even farther declaration. There would be Messiah that's come, and he comes 700 years afterwards from Isaiah's days. So I think if they want to argue, Cyrus was written afterwards by another disciple, then how can you reconcile it to the fact that Christ was even prophesied by Isaiah? Okay, with that, with the announcing of this greater deliverer, and there's a command to sing to the Lord a new song, which is really appropriate when God is going to accomplish this greater deliverance. So, sing to the Lord a new song, his praise from the ends of the earth. You who go down to the sea and all that is in it. Now he's saying like people that one day would go down from Judea to the sea, like to spread out the gospel to all that's in it, like you islands, like in the sea, and you will include the Gentile, the islands, the Gentile nations, and all who live in it, and them, all these Gentiles. So actually, it's already prophesied one day this gospel will be spread out from Judea and to all these foreign lands, they're far away. And then verse 11, let the wilderness and its towns raise their voices, let the settlements where Kedar lives rejoice, let the people of Selah sing for joy. Now, these are Kedar, Selah, these are a closer place like the Arabians, and they're closer. And he said, whether you are in the wilderness, like, these are the nomads, right? They raise sheep or in the wilderness, or whether they live in towns, let them all sing, let all the people sing for joy. So he's saying like, people you're far away, or you're closer, the Arabians, sing for joy. Let them shout from the mountains. Let them give glory to the Lord and proclaim his praise in the islands. Verse 13, the Lord will march out like a champion, like a warrior. He will stir up his zeal. With a shout, he will raise the battle cry and will triumph over his enemies. So here, the Lord is pictured as a warrior that he's going to call forth his servant. He's going to, like a warrior, like to set free like all the captives. So he's going to is a warrior, like type of like seal in him. So I've been pondering about this. How the Lord is going, like how the Lord is going to fight like a warrior? What do you think? Like how would he fight like a warrior? And then I thought, well, it's just probably he just fight by what? Just like Abraham sacrificing Isaac. Like his seal, for us, that he was just like he's just going to send like Jesus to the cross, and that's how he fought for us, and that's how he can triumph over the Satan. Okay, verse 14. For a long time I've kept silent. I've been quiet and held myself back. I believe this is a break at this point. That's is going back to the message to the Jewish captives in Babylon. So he's telling, he's addressing those audience. So God is revealing his heart. Like for the long time they have been in exile, and he said, I have kept silent. I've been like silently, like, I know you've been punished. You are punished for your sin, and I have kept silent. I've been quiet and held myself back. It seems like it's very difficult for him, for God, even to exercise his punishment. Like he knows he has to do it for being righteousness and being covenant faithful. And yet he said, he has to help himself back, as if like he like to rescue them right away. But now it seems the time is up now, like a woman in childbirth. And so finally the time has come. I cry out, I gasp, and I pants. So, like to birth, to birth out this baby, to do these new things. And what is this new things he's saying about? Verse 15, I will lay waste the mountains and hills and dry up all the vegetation. I'll turn rivers into islands and dry up the pools. Actually, this actually is just reflecting the same idea that we read in chapter 40. You remember, there's a voice crying in the wilderness, and prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the deserts a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. It's the same idea here. You just say, oh, okay, I'm so anxious to bring back the captives, so I will level, the mountains and hills, and it's easier for them to travel, right? So level them, dry up even these maybe places of vegetation. So I'll sacrifice all this vegetation, but level all this place so they can travel easily. I will turn rivers into islands and dry up the pools, and so they can walk on dry ground. So this is expressing like God's like kind of passion. He's so anxious to bring them back. By the way, when we read here, I also want to make a comment about Isaiah. So we read terms like now, like a child in, like a woman in childbirth, he cried out. Obviously, God is not in childbirth. It's just using the same analogy, that people can understand. And so there are many of these things like lay waste mountains, or like chapter 40 about level all the hills and all the mountains. I think they not necessarily have to be literally fulfilled. The Cyrus did come and release the captives back to their own land, so that's literal. But a lot of this is, like Isaiah is written in poetry, and sometimes poetry is trying to solicit emotions to the readers. So I don't think you necessarily have to try to find every word to be literal, to be fulfilled. I think if you do it that way, actually, you can get yourself into trouble. Anyway, that's the way I understand it. And Isaiah is the most beautiful poetry that you can find in the Old Testament. All this, just like the words we read, bruised reed, he will not break, smoldering wick, like he not snuff out. I mean, Isaiah can be just studied as, I guess, literature in itself. Okay, and verse 16, I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I'll guide them. So God is going to lead the blind, the captives, by ways they have not known. These captives, they were ignorant. They don't believe they would be released. And so, but, they will not know there's a way for them to go back. But God said, I'm going to lead them back. I will turn the darkness into light before them. So because they are in some kind of darkness. They thought, God has given up on them, and God would not help them anymore. So God is going to turn their darkness into light, and so that's not true. And make the rough place smooth. These are the things I will do. I will not forsake them. But those who trust in idols, who say to images, you are our gods, will be turned back in utter shame. I think this is also addressed to the captives. There are many of the captives. They actually still believe in idols. If you go back to Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 12, and God was showing Ezekiel, that's before the fall of Jerusalem. God was showing Ezekiel and saying to him, have you seen what the leaders of Israel are doing with their idols in dark rooms? So even before then, a lot of them, they were already worshiping idols, even in the temple. They are saying the Lord doesn't see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. So a lot of them actually, even before the captivity, they already thought the Lord has forsaken on them. And so I have no doubt when they went to Babylon, many of them would still be trusting idols. And so God is saying, to those who trust in idols, who say to images, you are our God, will be turned back in utter shame, because God is going to do this new thing. God is going to bring them back to Jerusalem. Okay, verse 18. So hear, you deaf, look, you blind, and see. Now, like when Isaiah was commissioned, God told him he's going to preach to people who have ears but could not hear, who have eyes but could not see. So God is here again, so trying to wake them up. He said, you deaf people, you blind people, hear and see. And who is blind but my servant, and deaf like the messengers I sent? Who is blind like the one in covenant with me, blind like the servant of the Lord? And so this are all referring to the Jews in captivities. You have said many things, but pay no attention. So throughout their history, God has done miracles, God has done mighty things, like conquered the enemies, and he has sent prophets with many messages. But these people are not paying attention. Your ears are open, but you do not listen. It pleases the Lord for the sake of his righteousness to make his law great and glorious. So God gave them the law because it's the Ten Commandments or the Sinai covenant, because it's out of his righteousness that he gave them. These are the law that are great and glorious. But this is a people plundered and looted, all of them trapped in pits or hidden away in prisons. They have become plundered, with no one to rescue them. They have been made loot, with no one to say, send them back. And now, they are plundered, they are trapped. So they are all captured in Babylon now, and no one was able to deliver them. So verse 23, which of you will listen to this or pay close attention in time to come? So now, maybe we read the next verse first. Who handed Jacob over to become loot and Israel to the plunderer? Was it not the Lord against whom we have sinned? For they would not follow his ways, they did not obey his laws. So here he tells them once again, why you were in captivity is because you have sinned. You will not follow his ways, you will not obey his law. It's not because the Lord God is less than the idols of Babylon. It's because of your sin. And the prophets have told you so many times, and you will not listen, and you will not hear, you will not see. Now, hopefully, after this experience, after you've been finally punished and you are in despair in Babylon, and sometimes that's how the way we are, right? We also have sometimes we only learn after we suffer, right? So God is saying here, which of you will, verse 23, which of you will listen to this or pay close attention in time to come? So now, can you not learn from this experience so that you pay, then you learn it for your better future, or for the next time you'll be better off. Verse 25, so he poured out on them his burning anger. The violence of war, it enveloped them in flames, yet they did not understand. It consumed them, but they did not take it to heart. So that's why you were in captivity. It's because you broke the covenant. Okay, and then let me go to chapter 43. But now this is what the Lord says, he who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. Now, after all this punishment, God is giving them the word. So God says, Jacob, you are the one I created. It's just like the whole universe was created by God. And out of the universe, out of all the people, God created a special people called Jacob or Israel. He said, after all this punishment, and they were very feared, and they thought God already gave up on them. God now told them, do not fear. I have redeemed you. I have paid a price for you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. And even after you have all this punishment, you will still belong to me. You are in my family. It's just like the father in your home and told the son, these are the rules of the house. If you break them, you're going to be punished. But so the child did break the rule, and then the father punished him. And then the son will say, oh, now my father is so angry at me. He doesn't love me, or he doesn't want me anymore. And so that's the feeling of the Jews in captivity. But God said, no, you are mine. You're still my child. You're still my family. You're still my sons and my daughters. When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt for your ransom, Cush and Seba in your stead. So God is a general promise that he will be with them through the waters. And in the past, you can say, refer maybe back to the Exodus of crossing the Red Sea. He was with them. The rivers, maybe the rivers of Jordan. He lead them to pass the river, and they will not sweep over them. Walk through the fire. You can think of Daniel, the fire. The flames will not set you ablaze. Is that Daniel? I cannot think of. But we have some example of that too. But the general idea is God is going to be with them, protect them. Yeah, you're still my child. I punish you, but I still love you. And say I would even give Egypt for your ransom, because in suppose a redemption, you have to pay a price. And I think the general idea is, you remember Sennacherib, he failed to capture Jerusalem because God, angel of death, or angel killed 185,000 of his soldiers. And then his son maybe came for revenge, also have another army. But God led his son to go to Egypt and Cush and Sheba and conquered those land, and then spared Jerusalem from that conquest. So in a way, so he spared them. He paid them a ransom. I think actually when I read this, it's a lot easier if we read it from the New Testament church or the Christians. God promised not to forsake us. He'll go through waters and fire with us, and then he would give up. And actually, the case is his son for our ransom, so that we are spared from our consequence of our sins. Since you are precious and honored in my sight, so these are his chosen people, his family, and they are honored. They honored because what? Not because of their character or what they performed, but because God has trusted his institution, his words with them, his laws with them. So they are really honorable. God has given them in such a different, precious position. And because I love you, you see, we go back to this again, is God loved them, even though he punished. Just like Hebrew 12:6 says, the Lord disciplined those he loves. So he just has given them discipline. I'll give people in exchange of you, nations in exchange for your life. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. If we read this, there's always, you read here, the word afraid is also so frequent in these passages, and also maybe the chapters before. You see, it reflects the general emotion of the Jews in captivity, even though God has given them the word of promise, and yet they are still very afraid. So do not be afraid, for I'm with you. I'll bring your children from the east and gather you from the west. I'll say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughter from the end of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. So God promised them, he's going to deliver them. He's going to bring them back to Jerusalem. So maybe some people in captivity, they feel, well, they're too old to go back, but God said, no, I will bring them. And I think it's a general saying, bring them back from north, south, afar, and then ends of the earth. No matter, I guess the idea is, no matter where they are, I'm going to bring them back. So, because what? I created them and for my glory, whom I formed and made. And there's one more idea is, he's not going to this nation, because if God raised up this nation, it's for his name's sake, for his glory. And so he has to do it like for his glory. And we know the Messiah is going to be born one day in Bethlehem. And if he did not bring them back, it also that means God's plan would fail, right? And so God will not let his plan fail. So he's going to bring them back. And I think part of the reasons that the captives were so afraid is they never heard of people being in captivity ever go back, able to return to land, right? So they were not very trustful. But this is one occasion that, yes, captives were brought back to the land of Israel. And then we had the modern day of regathering, right, in 1948. And it seems these words can also apply, right? And God is saying, I'll say, do not be afraid, I am with you. I'll bring your children from the east, from the west, the north, keep them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my son from afar, and my daughter from the ends of the earth. And I think, actually, I don't know whether that is a prophecy about 1948, but those are words even more appropriate that can be applied to the recent gathering of the Israelites back to their own land. So with all this, I think today, I think the message is, yes, God used the occasion of sending Cyrus to be a deliverer, to reveal that he has prepared even another more mightier deliverer who is not only for the Jews, but is for the whole world. And then it's also revealed, God also revealed to them, yes, open your eyes, open your ears. I punish you because you've been in violation of the covenant. But do not be afraid. I still love you. You are still my people. I still have chosen you. I haven't given up on you. And I will deliver your children back to the land. So I think God's love for his people is a comfort to all of us. So if we are accused, oh, you are that bad, we didn't do this, or we do that, like, yes, sometimes we get God's trying to discipline us for our own good, but never believe that he will discard us, that he has given us. His love is mightier, stronger than we can ever think of. So I think I close this message for the day, and may the Lord bless you with his everlasting love. I give the time back to the chairman.